Got that penny loafer.
Boo! Sorry, did I scare you? Happy Halloween, Squeekers. This is Mr. Clancy. Just kidding, this is Mr. Clancy. I am dressed up as my brother for Halloween.
Hello, Squeakers. This is Mr. Clancy. I am dressed up as my brother, Mr. Clancy. Hopefully you won't get us mixed up.
To celebrate the occasion, I have a fun Halloween story to read to you all.
It is called The Night of the Living Proctologist.
Gather around, Squeekers. It's circle time with Mr. Clancy. Hold on to your capuchons, because this story might be so frightening it'll take you so high in your jumpsuit. Mr. Clancy, do you mind killing the lights? I want to set the mood for the story.
Of course, Mr. Clancy.
Thank you. My pleasure. Now let's begin. It was Halloween night, and Napoleon was at home with his wife, with Napoleon almost making a complete recovery from his previous incident in the fire. Napoleon was excited to celebrate because it gave him an excuse to wear his pig mask as his costume and show off to the trick-or-treaters. Before he could do any of that, however, he and his wife needed to purchase some candy at the store. What's Halloween without candy? As they approached the car, a mysterious shadow loomed by. Napoleon turned around and raised an eyebrow, but didn't think much of it, assuming it was just his own shadow. Once they arrived at the store, they made their way to a large candy display that resembled a creepy haunted house. It went from the floor to the ceiling in height, with decorative neon gravestones scattered about. So many choices, Napoleon thought to himself as he browsed the different candy options. There were gobsmackers, lavish licorice, ducky dum-dums, and so much more. How about we buy a bag of Ned's Nougats? Those look scrumptious, his wife suggested. That's perfect. The trick-or-treaters will love those. You can never go wrong with chocolate. So they grabbed a fairly decent-sized bag of the chocolate and they continued on to the checkout. As they paid for the candy, Napoleon couldn't help but notice a mysterious shadow looming about again. He then remembered about that shadow that he spotted at his house earlier. Maybe it wasn't his own after all. He began to grow a level of concern for his safety. Just the thought of being captured by someone again made his heart race after the awful events of last time. Napoleon, is everything all right? It looks like you've just seen a ghost, his wife inquired. I don't feel safe right now, Debbie. I think someone's after us. What are you talking about? She asked as they started making their way towards the parking lot. He then told her about the two separate shadow occurrences and how the shadow could potentially be a kidnapper following them around. His wife then reassured him that everything was going to be all right, and there wasn't anyone she could think of who could see them as a threat. Shortly following her statement, Napoleon found a small note attached to the front of his car. Debbie, you have to see this. His hand trembled as he showed it to her. The note read, "Deema's in danger, give me the candy or else." And it was signed with a paw print. As Napoleon lowered the note, there stood a figure of a shorter stature wearing a black cloak in front of him and his wife. "Who are you? Give me the candy first. Then I'll identify myself." Napoleon then quickly snatched the candy bag and tossed it on the ground. The figure inspected the bag and sniffed it. "Thank you. This is exactly what I wanted. Now I must do my part." Napoleon and his wife stood there in anticipation, anxious to find out this figure's identity. The figure then carefully removed the hood of his cloak and sat there with the most innocent smile. It was none other than Napoleon's furry friend, Jim. Napoleon was incredibly relieved and thankful that's all who it was. He asked him why he wanted to lurk around in such an eerie way. It's Halloween, of course, and candy sounded way better than kibble for dinner tonight, so I wanted to follow you to see where you found the delicacies. That's nice to hear, but lurking around instead of just asking for the candy gave us quite the scare. So, Dima's not in danger, Napoleon wondered. Nope, I just wanted the candy. Can I have some now, please? Jim gave Napoleon his best puppy eyes. I appreciate you asking nicely, but I'm afraid this is chocolate. But don't worry, I'll get you some treats once we're home. Before they went home, however, they dressed up in their costumes and wanted to visit a good friend of theirs who lived on Mulberry Street. It was Penny. She was delighted to see Napoleon and his wife again, and of course Jim. Care for a capricin. I didn't have time to get candy this year. I hope that's okay. Of course it's okay, Penny. I'm pretty thirsty. Napoleon took one of the capricins and sipped it like it was Dom Perignon. He even gave some capricins to his wife and Jim too. Napoleon had to laugh because every time he saw a capricin, he was reminded of when those were used as his IV that saved his life. He held up his capricin proudly. Holy liquid for all, he cheered. And they all talked tough happily ever after. The end. Mr. Clancy, would you please turn the lights back on now?
Of course, Mr. Clancy.
Thank you. My pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this spooky story with me, Mr. Clancy. I hope that it didn't scare you away from trick-or-treating. I want you to have a great time dressing up and of course collecting candy. I hope you all have a wonderful Halloween. Happy squeaking.